Hey, it's Forrest. This is Yoga for Justice. I'm going to spend just a minute getting this link posted to my Facebook page. So just welcome to my face for a second here, and we'll get the view to my mat. And I'll scoot my coffee table, hopefully, out of the way. Mostly out of the way. So give me just 1 minute, and then we will begin. So I'm guessing that just no one was lined up waiting for this to start. And I keep time with my phone. So make sure that I have that handy. So welcome to Yoga for Justice. I'm Forrest, and tonight we are talking about prosecutors, a really crucial component to our justice system, to its function, to enforcing our laws. And we really need a better vision about how to do this. There's frankly several episodes of the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver show that examine the mass incarceration problem that we have in the United States, the for-profit prison problem that we have, and prosecutors are a piece of that puzzle. We really need to get a little stretch, a little openness about what that could look like versus what it does look like. And so once again this week, so we're going to start out in a child's pose. If you know what that is, go ahead and find your child's pose. And while in child's pose, I want to go ahead and start challenging a phrase that is really common, that is a part of, frankly, propagandizing the public about what prosecutors do and about what police do. So I want to, wherever, outside of the television show, which is a fictional universe and not real, wherever the phrase law and order exists in your mind, try to replace it with the rule of law, because they're not the same thing. One of our issues, one of the things that brought us here through multiple presidential administrations, through multiple, allegedly either Democratic type of or liberal minded people and administrations and people in power, we've ended up with this idea that tough on crime and law and order is the thing that we need to be going for. I'm telling you that's not the case. The rule of law is a different thing from tough on crime. And as far as sort of numbers go, I want to challenge the idea that more enforcement causes less crime. The causations of criminal behavior and crime are really complex and involve a lot of different things. And we really actually have to get a lot better at our social sciences before we start talking about what caused this rise or decrease in crime. That deserves a lot more thoughtfulness than just looking at sort of like how many officers on the street or how many convictions are coming through. So replacing law and order with rule of law. We'll look on the laws another time. I promise we're gonna get there. Coming to child's pose. Again, getting into that mind that a child doesn't have as many entrenched beliefs. Sinking your hips over your heels. So you can be way back, or you can kind of walk a little bit forward if you want to do your little shark fin child's pose with your hands together behind your head. It's really good for the shoulders, stretching out the backs of the arms. If you want to rest your forehead in your thumbs, or again, if you want to come all the way back here, folding over, just breathing here, breathing fully in and out through the nose. And just coming into your breath and maybe letting go of some of the stories that exist in your mind, this narrative. Who are prosecutors and what do they do? Making room for who they could be and what they could do. And we'll walk the hands over to the left, stretching out the side body. Plant that right arm, draw it back, draw through the hip. Inhale back out. Walking the hands over to the right, drawing back through the left arm, opening the left side body. Inhaling back out. I'm going to come compulsively check my microphone real quick. Can't stop myself. Maybe I could, but just ensuring that we've got everything together there. So, still in your child's pose, we'll take a little simple twist here. You're going to plant your left hand and thread the right arm underneath. Come down to the side of the face, the shoulder, opening the back of the shoulder. Unwinding, taking that left hand underneath, opening up the left shoulder, breathing here. Unwinding once more, and we'll come up for cat-cow. So finding your tabletop, shoulders over elbows, over wrists, hips over knees. We'll exhale, pull the belly up, rounding it toward the ceiling, rounding the spine, pushing the floor away. Inhaling, drop the belly, open the throat and the heart forward. Exhaling, drawing the belly up, rounding. Inhaling, opening back out. And just following your breath. Making some physical space in the body. The spine lengthens, hips and shoulders open up a little bit. And you can take any kind of extra movement or intuitive movement that you want. If you want to take it all the way back to your child's pose and then up to a cow, you can do that. If you want to take it back to child's pose and through to a bigger heart opener, make sure you point that tailbone back, exhaling. If you want to take this in the side body, you can look at one hip and then the other, and just finding whatever kind of shapes and movement that just feel good, that open up the body. It gives you a little bit of awareness of what it's doing, how it's working. I'm finishing up with one big, thorough breath, big, thorough exhale, rounding. And then come back to your neutral spine. Shoulders sit against the back. And if we're talking about prosecutors, we're talking about a powerful place in our justice system. So we're going to take some plank down dog floats. So tuck your toes, find your plank. If you want to be in a knee plank, that's fine as well. Just aim the tailbone back, lift through the belly, keep the chest open and the crown of the head forward. Exhaling, lifting the hips, finding your downward dog. Shoulders slide down the back, hips lift up, heels and knees relax. You don't have to have straight legs here. On an inhale, tuck the tailbone, roll through your stomach, through your chest to your plank. Exhale, lift it up, downward dog. Inhaling, tuck and roll all the way forward. Exhaling, all the way back. Then take 2 or 3 more of these plank down dog floats. Just kind of waking the body up, getting the heart going. And finishing with a downward facing dog, letting the shoulders slide down the back away from the ears, pressing into the hands all the way through the fingertips, lifting the belly. And we'll release the knees down to the floor, sinking it back for your child's pose. If you want to get out of your hands, take your arms along the sides. Breathing here. And then we'll come on up to a seat, whatever kind of comfortable seat works for you. I've been on a horse today out on the trail, so I'm going to take a little Supta Baddha Konasana. Little hip opener here. And I do suggest maybe working on a hip opener if you have some that you like, because that's one of the things we'll physically be working on with this today. So with this thought about thinking about prosecutors, about the rule of law, so there's a range of people who work in the function of prosecuting crimes. This is your district attorney or your county prosecutor at the local level. This is your attorney general at the state level. This is your United States attorneys at the federal level. Your U.S. attorneys are appointed by presidents, but in many states, including Mississippi, attorney general and your local prosecutors are elected positions. So the fact that they're elected is part of the problem. We kind of need a better way to put them in that place, because the one thing that happens is that they respond to what they see as the desire of the voters. And there's been years and years where the lines about law and order and tough on crime have gotten them votes, and then they've behaved that way in their offices because they want to stay in their job, and that doesn't actually serve the public very well at all. So leaving aside their self-concept of what they do, it's an important role in our justice system to have people whose job it is to go to court and make the case to convict people. But these are the primary people who put any type of check and accountability on our police forces. One of the problems at the level that we get to with the prosecution is that they frankly don't actually have to prove much of anything beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. That's a lot of times the line that is relied on, that, well, they must be ethical or they must be doing their jobs well because they have the burden to go to court and prove that someone's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But the fact is that 90% or so of convictions are through plea bargain agreements, plea deals. So they actually are not having to serve that purpose, and they're not having to give defendants a chance at a fair trial. They're not having to go through the cost of fully investigating a lot of crimes, but they are the people who are responsible for assessing the evidence that police officers bring them and making decisions about what goes forward either to a grand jury or to trial, depending on the particulars of your state or local jurisdiction. And Honestly, there are so many examples of the bad jobs and the sort of personal experiences that I could get into. But what I want to bring up, one, on the issue of the plea deals, if we're at this level of cost in the court system and in the carceral system, your Department of Corrections at whatever level, and it is mainly relied on by pretty much pushing people who don't have the resources to mount a credible defense into a plea bargain, we are not rendering equal justice, and we do not have a system that's doing anything fairly. The reliance on plea deals and the staggering proportion that they're at is one thing that should tell us that this role in our society is dramatically overburdened. It should tell us that we're calling too many things crimes. It should tell us that we are expecting too many problems in our society to be solved within sort of the court and justice system in the criminal justice system. So we should understand that their offices are, even though they have tremendously more resources than defense attorneys ever do, they are themselves overburdened. It's just that nobody is seeming to have the ethics or the sight to say, we've just got to reduce this dramatically, period. So in terms of cases that do get prosecuted, again, your prosecutors are in charge of determining whether the evidence is enough to go forward to the grand jury, and then they are in charge of putting on credible evidence to juries and judges. And I want to encourage you very much to not just watch the 13th, the documentary on Netflix, but watch the Innocence Files. So the Innocence Files begins with the story that occurred here in Mississippi in Noxubee County, beginning with a man named Levon Brooks, who was arrested for a heinous rape and murder of a very young child. And of course, it was one of these things that inflamed the community. People want to see justice done. That idea of law and order and lock up the bad guys is really appealing. And so he is arrested and cooperates, gives DNA evidence, goes all the way to trial, and ends up convicted of that crime. Within a handful of years, an extremely similar crime in a very close by also occurs. A different man, Kennedy Brewer, is arrested for that crime and also ends up convicted. These cases used an alleged expert in a field that could have been developed as a real science, but unfortunately a guy named Michael West became part of it. Of bite mark evidence was used to convict these two individuals, one of whom was serving a life sentence, one of whom was serving a death penalty sentence. It took the Mississippi Innocence Project fighting tooth and nail for years to get the original DNA evidence in the case processed. And this is after Kennedy Brewer met someone in prison who confessed to him to having done both of the murders. So in this case, there's two children who are dead, one of whose life could have been saved if Levon Brooks's DNA evidence and if the DNA evidence of the guy who actually did it, which was collected at the time, had only been processed. But it wasn't. And so why is that decision made? And why is that decision to rely on this really specious evidence with this? There's nothing for you but to watch it. Watch Innocence Files. He talks a lot in there. And so we've got prosecutors all over the state of Mississippi and all over the southern region relying on the expert testimony of this just genuine charlatan snake oil salesman. And then in Mississippi, at least, we have had an attorney general's office who refused, even after multiple instances of these egregious errors that resulted in either life sentences or death penalties, refused to go back and comprehensively review the cases. So we likely, in Mississippi, almost certainly actually, still have people convicted on evidence presented by Michael West when it was not credible. And we certainly have DNA evidence that doesn't get processed. And in many, many jurisdictions, you have things like rape kits that don't get processed. You also have issues of coerced confessions. And prosecutors are the people whose job it is to decide that that's not okay. So why do they keep deciding that it's okay? I don't have the answer to that, but we've got to have a better vision of how this function happens in our society. And so with this, we're going to move on to a little bit more movement, and we're going to start to open hips a little bit. Opening hips helps us. Open the heart helps us. Open up in general. And so with that, I'm going to check on one more thing because I'm going to be annoying. Just going to keep walking up and back camera. I just can't help it. So from here, let us find our way to our downward facing dog. Planting the hands, lifting the hips. Your spacing in your downward facing dog should be such that you can always float to your plank with your shoulders over elbows, over wrists, and then float back to your downward dog without moving your hands or your feet. So fine in that downward dog. If you want to pedal out the heels, extending to the floor, you're welcome to. We're going to inhale, right heel high to the sky. Exhale, swing it through between the hands and come up for warrior two. Bending into that right knee, checking on the right big toe. Tuck the tailbone, draw the belly in, and extend through the hands. All the way through the fingertips. Breathing. And as you tuck the tailbone, press through the feet and press down like you're going to tear that mat apart underneath you in two directions. On an exhale, windmill down to the inside of that right foot. We're coming to a lizard lunge. So your left foot, you can have that knee lifted or you can tuck it down. On your right foot, you can have this foot flat, or you can lift up your toes and let your knee hang over to the side. It's just real personal about how you want to get your hips. If you want, you can stay in your hands, or you can come down to your forearms. Just keep looking forward and keep your gaze forward, crown of the head forward. Breathing here. And if you're going to hang the knee over to the side, keep those toes flexed and bright. And you can rock a little bit in your lizard. It's just a nice deep hip opener. And if you want to sigh it out the mouth, sigh out your frustrations, you're welcome to do that. We're going to walk the hands back, planting that right foot back down, stepping back for plank. And you can take knees, chest, chin to cobra, or you can take low plank into upward facing dog on the tops of the feet, pulling your chest through, exhaling, downward facing dog. Inhale, left heel high to the sky. Exhale, swing it through between the hands, coming up, warrior two. Extending through the hands. Getting a little T shape. Your left heel should slide into the center of your right foot, bending the left knee, reaching through the hands, breathing here, gazing over that left hand at what the rule of law instead of law and order means. The rule of law would have had the DNA evidence tested. The rule of law wouldn't have had LaVon Brooks imprisoned. And he is deceased now, although he did have some years of his life to get to live out on his own terms. So rest in power, LaVon Brooks. We're going to exhale, windmill down to the inside of the left foot. Finding a lizard lunge. Again, personalizing it as much as you want. So this right knee can be lifted or planted. This left foot can be planted, or again, you can lift those toes and ease the knee over to the side. You can be in your hands or your forearms. Breathing here, trying to keep your chest open, trying to keep your crown of the head aiming forward. And we'll take the hands back up, stepping to your plank, rolling through your transition, knees, chest, chin to cobra or low plank. Either way, hugging those elbows in, cobra or up dog. Exhaling to downward facing dog. Breathing here. Inhaling, right heel high to the sky. Exhale, swing it through between the hands. Coming up, warrior two. And so with the idea of having scales and balance, we're going to take dancing warrior into a half moon for a balancing pose. And so dancing warrior, we flip the right palm, reach it back, let the left arm cross in front. Inhale through center. Exhaling, the left arm extends over, right arm reaches back. Inhale, center. Taking two more to either side. If you listen to True Crime, you're aware of the In the Dark podcast, which also takes place in Mississippi with a highly unethical prosecutor who ran unopposed this most recent time because it's a very insular community in terms of power. The power is very out of balance in a lot of these situations. And I'm going to scoot back so I don't throw myself into my piano. Might take your left hand to your hip. If you want to use a block, I suggest having it in your right hand rather than trying to place it on the floor. But trying to keep your hips and your shoulders square to the front like a little cartwheel that stops. You're going to step into this right foot, flex the left heel. Finding the floor or your block. Again, making sure you're really squared up to the side as best you can. It's hard after a horse ride. Maybe opening the left arm. Half moon balance. Stepping out. Oop, not on the cat. Exhaling the hands down. Step into your plank. Roll in through your transition. And exhaling. Downward facing dog. Hands strong all the way through the fingertips. Head relaxed between the upper arms. We'll inhale the left heel high to the sky. Exhale, swing it through between the hands, coming up. Warrior two. Again, setting your feet, getting ready for a little movement. The idea of balance and dancing warrior. On your exhale, flipping the left palm, reaching the right arm in front. Inhaling center. Exhaling, right arm extends over, left arm crosses the front of the body. Inhale, center. Taking two more to each side. Props to Michelle McNamara, who is also deceased, was married to Patton Oswalt, wrote a book that solved 13 murders and 50 rapes that multiple jurisdictions and prosecutors had failed to get anything done with. Coming back to center. Again, blocking your left hand if you want to use a block. Maybe the right hand comes to the hip. I'm going to scoot back again so that I don't hit my coffee table. And step into that left foot. Try to stay as best you can squared over to the side. Flexing that right foot. Maybe extending that right arm. Breathing. Making your way back out. Exhaling the hands down. Stepping back for your plank. Rolling through a transition. Exhaling. Downward facing dog. And then let the knees come down. Sink it back for child's pose. Pressing your forehead into the mat or a block or your thumbs. And then give yourself that vision of rule of law. We'll come back up to a seat. So there's honestly too many issues to try to talk all the way through in the way that does them justice in an hour. So we're just kind of hitting real strong examples is what I do with this. So I want to, again, Innocence Files and the case of LaVon Brooks and Kennedy Brewer in Mississippi. And moving on because we don't want to be all downer all the time. We're in a bad situation. It can be better. It's 100% possible for this to be better. So what are better ideas about, I can't read the word that I wrote. Better ideas about the function of prosecution, and they have a huge degree of discretion under the law about prosecuting and not prosecuting things. So they have qualified immunity that keeps them from getting in trouble for prosecuting the wrong things or doing egregious, horrible things with their evidence they have in front of them. And they have just no I don't know, it's not incentive. There's not a consequence on them under the law for their failures to prosecute anything. It falls under the discretion that they have under the law. They get to choose. So all that 90% of those plea deals, those prosecutors have the option to just say, my office is overloaded. There's too many things here. That evidence is bad. That confession was coerced, whatever it is. They have discretion not to rely on the plea deal system in the way that they do. They also have discretion in a number of other ways. So our consumer protection laws are some of the ones that tend to get the least amount of prosecution. These are usually going to be against businesses, entities with a lot of legal firepower and or money. But that's an area that instead of this little petty crap with, criminal misdemeanors, you could actually make a much bigger impact as a prosecutor working on these consumer protection laws and working for your communities in that way. One real life example that I thought was really good in recent days was in New York City. The district attorney announced that all of the arrests based on curfew violations would not be prosecuted during the periods of the protests. That's a piece where we're dealing with the lawmakers passing laws that don't actually help anybody or do anybody any good. And again, you have this role in your justice system that's about having discretion to choose. And so there's making a choice. You know what? These are not real crimes. These are not the things that actually make us unsafe at night. We're not going to prosecute these curfew violations. If you have just as much right under the First Amendment to be out protesting at 9:00 as you do at 3:00 in the afternoon. So that decision not to go forward with prosecuting curfew violations doesn't stop the detentions, doesn't stop people sitting in jail for a night or something like that, which is another problem, again, back with the police. But that can send a signal to police to don't bother with those arrests. They're not going to go forward. They're not going to go to your percentage or whatever it is you're looking for to get convictions. So that's sending signals to police by choosing what not to prosecute is a really important area of prosecutorial discretion. And then an example I want to bring up that's particular is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They have a really unusual district attorney named Larry Krasner. who has been inspiring me for years now. He was a criminal defense attorney for decades before he ran for district attorney. And what sort of caused him to do that, I'm not entirely sure. There's probably some media on it, but he ran, and he has been instituting this much more justice-focused vision of what the DA's office should be doing. So for one, he is holding accountable police officers who lie under oath. If somebody knows that they lie, that the officer who's supposed to be a witness in this case has lied under oath, we're not using him again. The police union hates him, by the way, and I don't know they all hate him, but he's controversial among law enforcement because he isn't doing this like status quo thing. He's not feeding the prison industrial complex and getting in lockstep and toeing the line like prosecutors are supposed to. So Larry Krasner in Philadelphia has also created an entire department within the DA's office about acknowledging that internal investigations of police by their own selves doesn't work, and investigating it instead. He has redirected a lot of sentencing recommendations and work outside of the prison system. He has advocated for things like a safe injection site for people who are addicted to intravenous drugs, and worked on decriminalizing substances and just a variety of different things. I really encourage you to read about him because it genuinely is a radical vision about a justice-oriented prosecution function, as opposed to a lock them up, throw away the key philosophy that tends to be really dominant. And I think he's very much more community-focused and data-focused. He's not prosecuting less, actually, but his office also has focused more on the consumer protection side, as opposed to, again, the petty individual crime side, which is just low-hanging fruit. And so from here, I'm going to come back up and obsessively check one more time to make sure I'm not getting things that say I can't hear or I can't see or the link doesn't work or whatever it might be. So we're going to come up to the mat, come into a chair pose, pulling the belly in, tucking the tailbone, sinking down, arms extend high. We're going to find a twist, taking the hands to heart center, taking right elbow over left knee, and sinking your hips down. And watch, squeezes back. I see that it's getting dark. I'm sorry about that. We're going to, as you get ready, look at your left foot and step the right foot back. Coming all the way into this deeper twist. You can put your hand down to the floor if you would like to. And release that, coming all the way out into a high lunge. Just pick up that left foot and place your left knee near your left wrist. Where you place the left foot, forward or back, depends on you and how much of a sort of intense stretch you want on your left hip. So left hip squeezes back, right hip squeezes forward. The deep hip stretch. Breathe in here. Maybe drawing that left hip back. Maybe walking the hands back, relying on that core strength to hold you up. And then we'll exhale down. Again, take in big sighs. If you want to, you can rest your forehead on your thumbs if you would like to. And if you have the room, you can come all the way down, resting your forehead on your hands and breathing here. Again, maybe sighing it out the mouth out loud. And walk up into the hands. And again, this is about stretching and reaching. So we're going to plant this left hand kind of in front of you for a little stability. Bend your right knee. If you have a strap, you can use the strap for this. Otherwise, we're reaching that right hand back and finding a deep quad stretch on the right leg along with this deep hip stretch in the left. Maybe you can pick up out of there a little bit. Breathing. Thinking about opening up your heart forward and stretching intensely. And we'll release that right leg back. Plant the hands, tuck the right toes. Lift this left leg up high. Give it a little hinge back and forth. Placing it down. Then we'll inhale, look between the hands. Exhale, walk the feet up to the top of the mat. Inhale to lift halfway, lengthen the spine. Exhale, fold in, forward bend. Sink the hips. Inhale all the way to standing. And exhale, hands to heart. And while you breathe here, I'm going to cut a light on so that we can see hopefully a little better. Look at that. Close enough? Yeah, I think so. So from your standing, pull the belly in, tuck the hips down, sink to chair. And breathing here. And we'll take the hands to the heart, cross the left elbow over the right knee. Sink your hips back as you press your hands together. And again, watching this left knee, keep it level with the right. Breathing. And look down at that right foot. You can unwind if you need to, but if you want to challenge yourself, look down at that right foot and step the left foot back, finding a twisted lunge. Releasing the hands, coming all the way up that high crescent, squaring up the hips. And we'll exhale, hands down. Lifting up this right foot, and then place the right knee next to the right wrist. Lay the leg down, taking the left leg back behind you. And again, closer into your groin, less of an intense stretch, further out away from you, more of an intense stretch in a pigeon pose. Breathing. You got your chest opening forward as you draw this right hip back and your left hip forward. You might want to make sure that that back leg is straight. If you will plug your toes into the floor and drag back, that can help you get there. Breathing here, lifting up through those lower abs, drawing that right hip back. Maybe you can walk your hands back, using that core support to open your heart as your hips open underneath you. And then on an exhale, walk it out, coming down maybe to your forearms, maybe to a block. You can rest your forehead in your hands here, breathing. Just keep all that strength, making sure you don't rock over and roll onto your right hip. Maybe sighing it out the mouth. When, as you're ready, if you want, if you have the room, come all the way down, breathing here. Lifting back out, walking back up. Again, scissoring those legs towards each other, lifting through your chest. And from here, we'll plant that right hand down, bending the left knee, and trying to reach that left hand back, opening the chest and opening intensely on that left quad as you open intensely in the right hip. Breathing. Just finding all the space you have. We're not going anywhere in particular from here. If you have some big variations in your pigeon, then go for it. And then release that left foot down, plant the hands, tuck the toes, lift, hoist that right leg high, give it a couple bends, lowering it back down, finding your downward dog. Inhale, look between the hands. Exhale, walk the feet up to the top of the mat. Inhale, lift and lengthen. Exhale, fold. Inhale, lift and lengthen once more. You're going to reach your arms out and slowly sink your seat to the floor. If you need to help yourself down with your hands, that's fine. It's still really dark. It should give us all the overhead light in the world, which is annoying, but I think we got to. So now we're way too bright. And if y'all will excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm having electronic communications come through. Apparently this is an interesting night to be doing anything. So from here, come down. And what we're gonna do is seal in this practice with just a little forward bend, seated forward bend, flexing the feet. You can let your knees bend all you want to. What you want is for this part of your back to lengthen from your tailbone up through your hips. And on an inhale, arms reach high. And we'll exhale, reach the heart forward, extend, and fold down. So your hands can find your feet or the floor. You can use a strap. And if you have the room, you can begin to straighten the legs, but don't make it a fight between your hamstrings and your low back. Breathe in here. Putting the rule of law over law and order. Looking into your local elections, your state elections, your AG candidates. On an inhale, look up past the feet. Walking the hands back gently. If it feels better to kind of take your hands back and just, you don't have to get a full big back bend, but just to kind of reach back, you're welcome to. We'll find a twist. Right foot will cross over the left. Keep that left foot flexed. Hold the shin and get up close. We'll wrap the left arm around, taking the right arm back behind, breathing here. So in Mississippi and a lot of jurisdictions, we still have, unfortunately, what amount to Dixiecrats. People who are not progressive at all have a lot of racist and biased attitudes of all sorts who run as Democrats. And so your ticket may include especially a prosecutor who is a Democrat but not at all progressive. Releasing that twist, taking the right leg down. So it's one reason it's really important to look for anything like in Oxford here, the League of Women Voters will do these wonderful panels where you actually get to hear candidates and maybe ask questions. Crossing the left foot over the right, plant the left foot down, flexing right foot. Hugging that leg up toward the chest. And then we'll wrap the right arm around the left leg, taking the left leg or left hand behind. Breathe in here. Releasing back out. And we'll come to a seat, for a little silent meditation. I'm going to close us out with Gayatri Mantra. It is a mantra about our search for the light and search for the deeper truths. We might get a knock on the door that's my dinner at some point, and I apologize. Had a lot of things run up against each other today. So lifting up tall. And so you can also come down for a Shavasana if you would rather have a deep relaxation in the floor. Otherwise, you can just take your seat, closing your eyes, lifting the crown of the head. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat. Gently bringing the eyes open, blinking, coming back. And again, just taking these in as things to consider and trying to open up to a different idea of what the prosecution is for, what prosecutors should be doing, other than sort of fueling this racist, oppressive prison industrial complex. Private prisons should not exist. For-profit prisons should not exist. And so we need to really think about, again, the laws themselves are a piece of it, but those who have the discretion of which laws we enforce are a huge piece of it. So look at who you're electing when you get the chance to. And in the meantime, there are people on the ground doing really amazing work on trying to correct these issues. So one is the George Cochran Innocence Project at the University of Mississippi. This was the group that worked again on the Brooks and Brewer case and on many of these Michael West cases, and have tried in a lot of different ways to get a comprehensive review of the bad forensic evidence that people have been sent to prison for. There is the Equal Justice Initiative. That's Brian Stevenson. If you have read or watched Just Mercy, that's his organization. And they do, again, just on the ground, boots on the ground, defense and appellate work. I believe Larry Krasner is running for DA again. You certainly could contribute to his campaign. I probably will. If you have a district attorney candidate that you learn has any type of kind of progressive idea about how to go forward, about how to either do more consumer protection and work on these heavily empowered entities like businesses or whatever it might be, donate to their campaign. But I'm going to leave you tonight with the George Cochran Innocence Project and the Equal Justice Initiative as the main places to donate. And if I think of others, I'll throw them in the links. But we've got to get up and do something. Thank you for sharing this practice with me and listening to me ramble. And thank you for your patience about my uh, awkwardness with technology and refusal to edit my live videos. Namaste.